I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, exactly who does run Greece? This man, well, he shocked the Eurozone with his initial call for a Greek referendum, but it didn't take long for Germany to start setting the questions. Also, a national carrier in distress. We report from Africa on the slow, painful descent of Air Zimbabwe. And when Detroit's motoring dream turned to bailout nightmare, Michigan went green. We look at how that's turned out and speak to a major automaker turning 100 years old. You know, some weeks it's really easy to do a show about the Eurozone. Others, like this week, not so much. Not because there's nothing happening. In fact, it's the opposite. So much has happened and is happening in Europe that it's actually hard to keep pace. But what we found is an interesting common thread to pull out this week, the issue of sovereignty. You see, by now it's the International Monetary Fund and the European Union and the European Central Bank which are virtually calling the shots for Greece. Athens only gets money when it meets certain criteria. And then when Prime Minister Papandreou tried to call a referendum in his own country, he was summoned to the G20 meeting in Cannes and given an ultimatum. Now, at this point, it's also interesting to note the language used in that ultimatum by Germany, particularly Chancellor Angela Merkel when it comes to this Greek issue. Here is what she said. Quote, "We would rather achieve a stabilisation of the euro with Greece than without Greece, but this goal of stabilising the euro is more important. In other words, don't think saving you is our priority." And then this, our Greek friends must decide whether they want to continue the journey with us. Not really the friendliest tone now, is it? So clearly Germany, to a lesser degree France, are calling the shots, as are the institutions which we mentioned before. And we're going to look at one of those in particular, which arguably should have a say in things because it keeps buying up the Eurozone bonds to help struggling countries. We're talking the European Central Bank, which these days is actually going beyond its remit in buying up those bonds, and now has a new man at the helm who kicked off his tenure with an immediate interest rate cut. Nick Spicer has more on that.
Perhaps the man with the toughest job in Europe. Mario Draghi must defend a currency under daily attack, push governments in perpetual disagreement into collective action if he can, and try to show the markets he is completely independent.
After today's decision, inflation should remain in line with price stability over the policy-relevant horizon. Owing to their unfavorable effects on financing conditions and confidence, the ongoing tensions in financial markets are likely to dampen the pace of economic growth in the euro area in the second half of this year and beyond.
The problems are plentiful. Markets betting billions against the weaker nations of the Eurozone, crushing them under rising interest rates. Then Greece. Its government teeters on the edge of collapse days after angering its partners in calling for a referendum on a painfully negotiated bailout.
Everything we had hoped for markets to calm down after the agreements of last week have basically been deleted, and we now have to face the situation as before.
But the German press has dubbed Draghi an honorary German, a hard money man, a man who has got what it takes to achieve success.
He comes out of an Italian paradox in a sense. Italy for a long time has had excellent bankers with a strong sense of fiscal responsibility. And on the other hand, the country at large and its policies have not shown that.
Before taking on this job, Draghi badgered Italy's Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi to cut spending so as to drive down government borrowing costs. With previous jobs as Italy's central banker, a World Bank director, Harvard professor, and private banker, Draghi has the track record to convince decision makers.
Mario Draghi needs to convince other people, and not just the critics of capitalism who have come to camp out in front of the European Central Bank. He needs to convince the markets. The bank is buying up the bonds of the troubled Eurozone economy so that the governments can continue to finance themselves, and that includes bonds of the Italian government. But if he does too much of that, he may be seen as playing for the home team, endangering the credibility of the European Central Bank, the euro's last line of defense.
All right, this week we've got someone very well placed to explain the current spheres of influence in the Eurozone. He was a senior advisor to the former German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder. It is Wolfgang Nowak joining us from Berlin. Wolfgang, thank you for your time. It was so interesting, I thought, to see the language from Angela Merkel this week. We mentioned it before, but also what sounds like an out clause, sort of, look, what we'd really like to do is cut you free and sort this mess out by ourselves. Thank you very much.
Well, Merkel was, of course, astonished and shocked when she got the news from Greece, because they had discussed, I think it was a fortnight before, how to save Greece. And Merkel knows that she is losing public support in Germany for spending an enormous amount of money to Greece. Every day we see Greek television, we see people throwing gas bombs, doing everything. And Merkel was really shocked that before going to G20, when the Europeans wanted to show that they are united, that they could solve their own crisis, that they don't need China, that they could be a good example to the US, and now it's all a mess. And Merkel became angry. And you should know that Greece came into the euro by giving wrong figures. She is angry, and I think I haven't seen many times Merkel angry. She always is a diplomat, and you can see in her face that she's angry. I think she means it, and she said now Greece has to get out. This would harm French banks, of course, but I think Merkel is quite clear now. It's enough is enough. And she expresses the mood of her electorate. I think she will get up at the polls for these remarks.
What's your personal view, Wolfgang, if I can ask you for that, what you feel about Greece's position now? The idea of Greece leaving the euro, or maybe there being a two-tier euro system, these have been knocking around for a while, but the logistics of it would be huge to actually take a country out of the shared currency and reset itself.
It's completely, nobody planned it. When we introduced the euro, nobody was even thinking of that a country would leave the euro. But I think that if I were in Greece, if I were the Greek Prime Minister, which nobody in the world, I think, wants to be the Greek Prime Minister, if I were the Greek Prime Minister, you can't really make a policy against the majority of your countrymen. And therefore, the idea of Mr. Papandreou to have a public vote over the euro or against the euro or against these measures is right. But the Greek people should know if they vote against the help, they will be more free, but they will fall back into a third world status. And I don't think that anybody wants it. But I think that the whole euro lacks democratic support. When the euro was introduced in Germany, the German people were not asked, and we were in love with the German mark. And now we see this mess. But this crisis has to come to an end. And I think Papandreou did the right thing, and also Merkel did the right thing to tell the Greece about the consequences. We can't live with markets who go up and down and up and down. This is not good for any economy, although the German economy is in a fantastic condition, actually.
Yes, but this is where it comes down to this country versus bloc argument. Is it countries looking after their own interests or the interests of other countries or the Eurozone bloc as a whole? None of these things mesh together. Now, we might say Mr. Papandreou made a really bold move to put Greece's future into his people's hands. But then Germany came in and said what it thought the referendum should be about. It makes you question who is actually in charge here.
Well, there's also a question of trust. If you give such an amount of money to Greece and you want to help them, you have to trust them that they would do it, like the Irish, like Portugal, like Spain. You have to trust them. And what I think that the Europeans and the Germans have lost trust, because you can't agree to everything and say the government will solve it, and then in a week later you really destroy the markets, you destroy everything by saying now we have a referendum. And it can't go on like this, that we ask Greece to do something, then they do it, then they don't do it, then they are not ready, then they will then they have other ideas, and then it goes on. We have to stop this crisis, because this crisis is hurting the euro and is hurting Europe.
Euro is still worth saving, though, isn't it?
The euro, I think the euro is worth saving. I think, there's a dream of Germans to have the wonderful German mark, but the euro is worth of saving, because it's a big market. It could be a currency which could compete with the US, which could compete with the Chinese currency, maybe even replace the part of these currencies. It's a big success, but to make this a success, we need the solidarity not only of the rich countries, we need also the solidarity of the not so rich countries. And what we now looking for is a little bit of solidarity for Greece. I know that Greece needs a Marshall Plan. Greece needs more help than even the former GDR has gotten from Germany. But Greece must be reliable. And what we miss is a sort of reliability. This is a problem. There's one vote at the end of this week. There's a vote in December. Maybe there are elections. Of course, this is a democratic procedure, but the markets, and it's a pity, democracy depends on the markets. The markets cannot wait, and we can't live any longer in the crisis, and I cannot really underline it. One day we will have anti-European parties. We have them already in the Netherlands, we have them in France, we have them in Britain, and we don't have them in Germany. We're a very reasonable opposition party, and we might lose this public consent, and then Europe is in a mess, not the euro.
Wolfgang Nowak with his view from Berlin this week on Counting the Cost. Thank you, Wolfgang. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
One more element to discuss before we leave the Eurozone this week, and that is the outside influences which could yet play a part. You'll remember there's been talk of the BRICS nations injecting money into Europe, be it through the European Financial Stability Fund, the EFSF, or the IMF. And again, the French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been banking on China stepping in. Is China really interested, though? Have a listen to this. This is part of an exclusive interview with Jin-Li Kun from the China Investment Corporation, which manages $400 billion of the nation's money.
If you look at the troubles which happened in European countries, this is purely because of the accumulated troubles of the worn-out welfare society. I think the labor laws are outdated. The labor laws induce sloth, indolence, rather than hard working. The incentive system is totally out of whack. If you say, hey, European countries are in trouble, why don't you pour your resources in these countries in trouble? And our people would ask us a question, wait a moment, are you sure you can get a fair share of returns by of investment? Because this resource, this money is the result of the Chinese people who work very, very hard.
And there's more of that interview to see on the latest edition of Talk to Al Jazeera with Taimur Nabili. That is running across this weekend and on Monday as well. Just to underline, though, what was said in that interview, Melissa Chan, our Beijing correspondent, has this quick snapshot on how much talk there actually is in China about Europe.
In China, the G20 and what's happening in Greece are not the major news items. Just to give you an example, the front page picture here shows the Chinese space program, and the main headline is talking about tackling pollution in the city. But down here there is one line, and it says that China is not yet ready to assist the EU. That doesn't mean the country is not watching the situation very carefully, however. After all, a strong European economy means European consumers to purchase all those factory goods this country exports.
And still ahead here on Counting the Cost, we're in Zimbabwe, where the national carrier is only just remaining airborne. We will hear the two very different arguments as to why a little later in this program. But we're off to the United States right now, Michigan, which could just be an example to the rest of the country of how to get back on its feet. The key to anything in the States now, and this goes right up to winning next year's presidential election, is job creation. And in Michigan, it is actually happening. Have a look at this from John Terrett.
Brad Glendy reckons he's a lucky guy. A General Motors man since the mid-90s, but laid off from a plant in Wisconsin, he transferred his entire family to Detroit.
We have a lot of people that are just happy to be back to work, not being unemployed. They know when their next paycheck's coming, so yeah, I think everybody's really happy just to be back to work.
The big three US automakers are leading the economic recovery in Michigan. GM was bailed out by the US government, but has since slimmed down, taken back some of the laid-off workers and returned to profit. But the auto industry isn't the only engine of growth in Michigan.
Green technology is absolutely, if not one of the ways, the way out of the state that we're in.
Robert Allen and his brother saw a gap in the market for solar energy. They developed a solar roofing shingle with backing from the state of Michigan, which has been courting green technology companies.
Michigan went over the top for us, advising us, putting us in front of the right people.
There are still many run-down buildings in downtown Detroit, a city devastated by the financial crisis. But cheap real estate prices plus state and city incentives mean major companies have begun committing to the city, like mortgage firm Quicken Loans with 2,000 jobs, and the health giant Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is consolidating 3,000 staff downtown.
Michigan can only be strong when the core cities are strong. And so this is really a statement about supporting our region.
Talk of economic recovery is not confined to Michigan's major urban centres like Detroit, but it can be found right across the state. On one side of 48th Street here in Holland, Michigan, nothing but cornfields. Behind me, a brand new factory owned by the South Korean company LG to build batteries for electric vehicles. And the hope is that other companies will follow, making this the battery-making centre in the United States. But political watchers say whatever the hopeful signs, next year's presidential election could still be very close.
The Obama administration has spent a lot of time in Michigan and a lot of money in terms of green energy and rail money with stimulus. But on the other hand, you have a Republican governor and Republican legislature, and if Mitt Romney is the nominee, he has a very big power base here in terms of fundraising since he was born in the state. So I think it will be neck and neck.
Regardless of who wins the White House next time, the workers here are just glad their plant is running at full tilt and that they've helped to put Michigan back on the road again.
And you saw there the factory which is going to manufacture batteries for electric cars. Topical because this whole green revolution in the auto industry is key to its future. We're going to talk about that in a moment with one of the big auto players, Chevrolet, part of the General Motors Group, which just happens to be marking 100 years of existence.
Your key to true driving pleasure. Let him show you how easy it is to own a beautiful new Chevrolet.
And I'm pleased to say we've got the president of Chevrolet Europe, Wayne Brannan, joining us this week from La Chaux-de-Fonds in Switzerland. Wayne, let us start with your green credentials, this Chevrolet Volt, I believe it's called, which you're taking to market in Europe. Do you think the public is excited and interested enough in hybrid electric cars to make this work? They've always sort of been seen as a more exotic auto option.
Yeah, I think they are, and I think it's going to be even stronger once people really understand the product innovation that we're bringing to market with the Volt. So, yeah, it's a perfect time to talk about it today, Kamal, because we're here in La Chaux-de-Fonds, the birthplace of Louis Chevrolet, celebrating our 100th anniversary. And one of the key messages today, of course, is that we are launching Volt today in Europe. About a year after we've started in the U.S., production is beginning to ramp up, and we're setting up a dealer network, launching in 5 countries to start here. And what we found is that the extended range electric capability of the Volt is not broadly understood. But once people realize that they have 80 kilometers of full battery range, and then they have up to 500 kilometers of electric driving range by creating their own electricity on board, and that they're never going to get stranded on the road because of their battery runs out. Once they understand that, they say, wow, this is absolutely the best idea going right now, and it makes driving an electric car possible for me. So we're really excited about the opportunity. Of course, it's a daunting challenge to have to communicate something that's unique and different when you have a new innovation, but we think that the efficiency of all of the digital world today will help us to get that message out, and we're really optimistic about what it means for electric motoring, but also what it means for the brand overall.
All right, Wayne, let's look at the business of Chevrolet Europe itself, because on this program we talked to a lot of economists about what's happening in Europe with regards to market confidence and business conditions, but I'm more interested to hear from an actual businessman, and that's big or small business, we don't mind, as to how it actually affects them. This European downturn, which has been going for a few years, it hasn't got any real end in sight either. How has it impacted upon your business?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, I would have liked to have been launching all of the new cars we're bringing to market into a stronger economy and a stronger auto industry. But the truth of the matter is we've been growing. We held market share through the deepest part of the downturn, 2009. We grew our market share last year, and through the first 9 months of 2011, we sold 380,000 cars in Europe. It's our best year ever, and we're on track to have an all-time record, not only in Europe, but on a global basis for Chevrolet. So I think I would say it this way. Yes, there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. There's a lot of us who are trying to understand what the economic and auto industry environment will look like in 2012 and beyond. Harder to predict those things, but we know one thing for sure, that when we take cars to market that have the right style, the right affordability, the right content, and the right features for customers. And we do it with a brand that they can feel good about. We know we can gain share and gain business even in a down market. So would like to have had a little stronger environment, but we're doing pretty well right now. And I think it's all about our product and our brand growth that's going to make that possible.
Are you confident, and I don't know if you're going to give me a straight answer on this one, but I'll try anyway. Are you confident with the way European leaders are responding to businesses' needs on the continent right now, creating the right business conditions?
Yeah, that's a tough one for me. I mean, honestly, I'd be happy to give you a straight answer. The answer is I really don't know. It's hard. It's a very, very complex world we're living in today. And, you know, I watch the news just like you and all the others do, and I'm trying to understand all of the political and economic issues and how it's going to affect our business. I've got some of the business networks on in my office all day long trying to see, you know, what's going to happen and how it will affect us and how we should, you know, change our strategies. But at the end of the day, it's really going to be up to, again, how customers perceive our brand and our business. There's enough business out there for a brand like us in Europe right now as a 1.2% brand in Western Europe and 2.5% brand overall, that we know we can double or triple our business in the next few years just as people find out about who we are. We've got more of an awareness product for our problem for our brand than we have a problem of a weak industry. So I think we're going to be okay in this environment. For the bigger brands, it's a bigger issue.
You talk a lot about your customers, which is good because they're the ones you're serving, obviously, but I wonder about your own people, their jobs and their livelihoods. Have you actually been able to hold on to jobs? Have you been able to, dare I say, create jobs in this environment?
Yeah, actually we have. Over the last couple of years, we've actually increased, let's see, I'll give you a number that's pretty accurate here. In Europe, we've added about 120 jobs since the 2009 period. So we're looking to put a few more people on. We've got 25, 30 open requisitions for people right now. We're actually searching for people. So yeah, we're actually in a growth mode still, and our people are working hard, and we're trying to get them some help. We'd like a few more people contacting the dealers as our network is getting more active and selling more cars. So yeah, we're on more of an upturn in our business. It's not a big business yet in Europe, but we're on the grow.
Wayne Brannan, the President and MD of Chevrolet Europe, joining us on Counting the Cost. Thank you for your time, Wayne.
Pleasure's mine, Kamal. Thanks for your interest in Chevrolet.
And from the streets to the skies, though the subject of our next report seems to be spending more time on the ground these days rather than flying. Air Zimbabwe is on the verge of collapse, and depending on who you talk to, it's either the Zimbabwean government or Western governments who are to blame. This from Haru Mutasa in Harare.
Taparara Patikadova is worried. He has 9 children and hasn't been paid in months. He says he can't even afford to go to work. He's been with Air Zimbabwe for 37 years, and he's angry at those in charge.
This present management doesn't know how to manage. It's worse. It's worse than any management you think of. It's worse. It's worse because they are very arrogant and they are ignorant. Not only that, they are very cruel.
The state-owned airline is still managing to get its planes off the ground, but only just. It owes nearly $150 million. Its pilots are often on strike. The company has no money to pay wages and can't afford to replace its aging fleet. Industry professionals blame the airline's problems on bad management and corruption. But those in charge say Western nations are deliberately trying to kill off the airline.
Zimbabwe has a financial problem. And it's a financial problem that is uprooted out of the illegal Western imposed sanctions. Air Zimbabwe is not and does not operate in isolation. It's part of a whole system that has been targeted by the West. And that is the root problem, or that is the root cause of our problems.
Only 5 of the airline's 8 planes are flying. There's talk of selling a stake of the bankrupt company to a private investor, if one can be found.
In previous years, the state managed to inject money into the cash-strapped airline. That is now harder to do, and other airlines have started taking advantage of Air Zimbabwe's financial problems.
South African Airways has increased flights and in some cases lowered ticket prices to Zimbabwe. Other international airlines plan to start flying to Harare early next year. Air Zimbabwe used to be one of the best on the African continent. Some here will try and make sure it doesn't fold, even if staying in business is just a matter of national pride.
And that is our lot for this week. But if you want to get in touch, here's how you do it. Either send a tweet to me at Kamal AJE or our business editor at Abid Oliver Ali, which is all one word. If you're not on Twitter, email's just fine. Counting the cost at aljazeera.net is our address. While you're online too, you can head to aljazeera.com/business and link on to the CTC page. That is where we put all our episodes up in full for you to catch up on whenever you want. But that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.